Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today I want to talk about how in the world we ended up in a situation where in many cases rates pay less than what it costs to operate a truck, yet capacity is still hanging in there. Many of us are shocked at this point because I know that some of you have already read that the average cost per mile for a truck is $2.27 per mile as of 2023, which is the latest data. Yet those kinds of rates are almost non-existent in the market. So how are people doing it? Let's chat about it. Ready? Let's go. Obviously, we are in a situation where at least some capacity is leaving the market and capacity is decreasing a little bit. Some carriers are downsizing, others are completely ceasing operations. But one thing is for sure, rates are not responding, which means that shippers and brokers still have the pricing power simply because they have a ton of choices when it comes to carriers. But the question is, wouldn't the increased expenses paired with the lower income drive people out of the industry in higher numbers than what we are actually seeing? Well, there are a few scenarios that would potentially keep folks in the game for longer. So let's talk about them. So number one, it is very possible that there are folks out there that don't actually know their cost per mile, end up booking loads that pay less than what it costs to operate their equipment, but are operating under the illusion that they are surviving. Now, how in the world does this happen? Well, a lot of people don't micromanage their operations and they don't look at income versus expenses on a micro level. Many people in this industry base their decisions on, do I have enough money in the account to operate for another week? At the end of the day, it is much easier to calculate how much money you're going to receive from a particular load versus how much money you expect will go out in a particular week. And it's easier to look at this all in whole numbers. So for example, you have $1,000 in your account right now, and you just hauled a load for $4,000 that you decide to factor today, and at a 2% fee, you know that tomorrow you are going to receive $3,920 cash in your account. And at the same time, you estimate that your fuel expense, which is the only expense you have this particular week, will be about $1,800. Other than that, there are no other payments due this particular week, for example. So in this case, you are now $2,120 positive in your account, even though the load, the $4,000 load you booked, was $1.80 per mile and your cost per mile is $2. Now, of course, this creates a false sense of security, which does end up biting people in the behind. But this leads me to my next point. How accurate is the cost per mile really? So here's the thing. Your cost per mile will change from day to day, from week to week, and from month to month simply because it's calculated using the miles that you actually drive. In theory, if you drive more miles, your cost per mile goes down, even though some of those variable expenses, such as fuel, is going to go up with the amount of miles you drive. At the same time, if you drive less miles and you have a lot of fixed expenses, your cost per mile is going to go up. So another thing that I have seen people doing is working more in order to drive that cost per mile down. So I'm going to add this video here so that it's easier to explain. So let's say that month one, you have $17,500 in expenses for that month, which includes those variable expenses such as fuel and maintenance and so on and so forth. And that month, you drove 9,000 miles. That means that your cost per mile for that 1 month would be $1.94 per mile to operate your equipment. Now, let's look at month two. Next month, you drive 11,000 miles and your expenses also increased because of fuel. You drove more, so you had to refuel more. So your expenses are $19,000 for that month. But your cost per mile just decreased to $1.73 per mile. So that means in month one, yeah, you can book loads for $1.94 per mile, theoretically, theoretically, and more or less you're going to break even. But in month 2, that same truck could book for 20 cents less on average and still break even. So considering the freight market, that's what a lot of folks start doing. They start driving more miles in areas that have cheaper fuel, and this allows them to book loads at those cheap rates without actually losing money. But, and there is a big but here, even though something like this can definitely help a carrier or an owner-operator stay in business for a little bit longer, there are some crappy consequences. Number one, when you start accruing a ton of miles, you are effectively wearing down your equipment, which inevitably leads to higher maintenance costs and higher expenses due to breakdowns. Number two, running like this means short-term survival, sure. But what happens when unexpected expenses arise and you need cash really quickly to pay to repair your truck? Yes, using this method of driving more, you might have been making a small profit even with the bad rates that exist on the market, but the question is, were you making enough to put aside cash in those unexpected situations? That's why you will often hear people in this industry say that carriers are just one breakdown away from bankruptcy. And number three, and something we don't really talk about a lot, at least not on this channel, I don't see it in the comments, is the fact that every person's cost per mile is going to be different from the get-go depending on how they set up their operations. An owner-operator with a paid-off truck and a paid-off trailer that they own is going to have a much different cost per mile than me, for example, who has a finance truck and a rented trailer, both of which require physical damage insurance. Now, I'm going to give you some of my numbers from a prior month, a few months ago, for one truck. Considering the fact that I have financed equipment, I have a rented trailer, and I have to have physical damage insurance for both, the cost per mile for this truck was $1.75 per mile. Now, if I were to just remove the truck financing payment, the trailer payment, and the physical damage insurance, guess what? That cost per mile for that same truck in the same month would be $1.33. A stark difference. So when I see comments saying all carriers, all owner-operators, all drivers are stupid because they are running cheap freight and booking cheap freight, well, that's not really accurate, is it? If you have a cost per mile of $1.33 per mile, for example, and you're running 11,000 miles per month, you can be booking loads for $1.65 per mile, and you can still make a small profit of $3,520. Now, if my cost per mile is $1.75 and I try to book loads for $1.65, yeah, I'm at a loss. But just because I cannot afford to book cheap freight and actually get away with it doesn't mean that the person next to me can't do that either. Now, the question is, $3,520 profit, is it worth the 11,000 miles that you have to drive to earn that $3,520 in profit? Now, if you were to ask me or my business partners, we would all start screaming a big, hard no, this is not worth it. However, if you ask the next person, for them, it might be very much worth it. I think at the end of the day, in the majority of situations, the reason people are choosing to continue working hard and fighting for their place in this industry is the same reason why it took me so long to make the decision to downsize. Hope dies last. I'm speaking from personal experience just a few months ago when I would sit and think, okay, next week will be better, or okay, next month will be better, there won't be the same expenses, or it can't last for longer than it already has. And those thoughts are what keep you going. Now, the flip side of this, I mean, hope is a wonderful thing, but the flip side is that you stop focusing on the big picture. You start focusing on being able to survive just long enough to be able to see that change. And you're hoping that change comes sooner rather than later. What do you guys think? I would be very curious to hear your thoughts. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me today and watching. I hope you have a fantastic start to your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.